have siblings, then you know that sibling rivalry is a real thing. Sometimes siblings can just be jerks. But how far would you go to punish a sibling who is mistreating you? Even if it was an accident, would you hurt them? We'll find out just how terrible those accidents can be in tonight's story, Nina Hoffman's Coming Home.
I love this house. Except that one closet. I don't think I'll ever leave this house, no matter what happens or who lives here. Even though I don't like the closet and it's so close to my room, I hate to leave my room because I have to go past it. I know what happened in that closet, but I don't think about it or where my brother Matt is. He's been dead longer than I have. I'm still not sure if he's here in the house or not. My room is the big room at the sunrise side of the upstairs. There's a great big picture window I can see the mountains from, and I love looking at them when the moon slips up behind them because that's when I'm the strongest in the cool moonlight, not like the mornings when the sun flames across the sky. The sun makes me feel pale. I think that's funny because it used to turn me brown every summer. This house is like a white wedding cake with a piece cut out in front. The upstairs is smaller and sits on top of the downstairs, and a giant came and cut a piece out of the middle of the downstairs. I think it may have been the piece with the biggest rose. The house is frosted white as a wedding, and upstairs doors lead out onto the roof so I can pretend to be the bride on top of the cake. Mama called this house adobe. I think it's like living inside of a cake with windows. My best friend Robin, 10, a whole year older than me, used to live next door in the flat, ordinary house I can see from one of my windows. She liked to come visit, especially after I told her about the cake. She wanted to be a scientist. She said, "Livy, if I had your brain, I'd put it in a glass bowl and ask it questions all the time." She didn't say that after Matt was in the closet. Nobody said anything nice to me for a long time after that. We moved away and I never saw Robin again.
After 25 years, I was going back to the house I couldn't ever remember calling home, though I lived there with 4 brothers and my parents the first 9 years I was alive. When my husband Scott turned the van onto the private lane that led to the house, I felt as though a lump of ice formed in my chest, as though I were all alone, even with Scott in the driver's seat beside me and the 8 kids yelling all around us. Sarah was in my lap and she was squirmy as a puppy. Dion kept tugging on my braid and saying, "Are we there yet, Mommy? Can I have my own room?" Sterling said he was the oldest and deserved a room of his own if anybody did. Carol said, "Who said Sterling was the oldest? He didn't know his real birthday, did he? Maybe she was older." They had this argument every year when it got too close to June 20th, when we celebrated their birthdays together. The adoption agency had told us they had no birth certificate for Sterling. Nick yelled for everybody to shut up. He had a deep little voice that reminded me of a frog's croak. He said that this was a special moment and Maria wanted it to be nice, so shut up. He always spoke up for Maria. She was our newest, only with us 7 months, and still shy and quiet. Sometimes I wondered if she really said any of the things Nick credited her with, but it didn't matter. She clung to him and he cared for her, and that was enough. Later, when she settled in, I would ask her how she felt about things. Prudence said, "Is this it, Mommy? Is this where you lived when you were little?" I said, "It must be." I felt cold, even though sunlight splashed down on the lush greenery of gardens on both sides of the car. "It must be, but I don't really remember, except I saw a patch of pampas grass in somebody's front yard and a drive bordered with fuchsia bushes. I felt a shiver ripple up my back. None of this was new, yet when I reached for memories, I found only gray fog. My life began at my grandmother's house in San Francisco, almost 10 years after I was born. I thought that this was what it was like for our kids. They had lives behind them, mostly in institutions, where they waited for someone to want them. Then we adopted them, and their lives really started. I remembered the first time I handed Sterling, our first child, a rolling pin and invited him to flatten out some gingerbread dough so we could cut cookies. He was 6 and very solemn. I didn't know how to talk to him. Children seemed like another species to me, a fascinating species I wanted to study, but I didn't know how to approach them. When I handed Sterling the rolling pin, his eyes brightened. When I gave him the raisins for the gingerbread boy's eyes, I remembered my grandmother reaching out to drop precious raisins in my own small hand. Almost my first ever memory. That first contact with Sterling had warmed me, kindling my desire to learn about and love children the way Scott did. Scott spent a lot of his work time doing custody determinations. He was always concerned that the children he worked with stay with the best parent for them.
"What's that?"
Artie asked, leaning forward to point past my shoulder, nearly hitting Sarah on the head as he did it. "A stone pine tree," I said. And how did I know that? It was like a bonsai left by a giant, an enormous twisted tree standing in the center of the driveway in an elevated circle of ground ringed by stones. There was the big turnaround in front of the houses at the end of the drive. I stared at the white one, a piece of the old Southwest transplanted to this Southern California town, blocky white adobe with vigas poking out here and there. Its unlikeliest features its huge windows. In real adobe buildings, the windows were small, the thick walls conserving heat in the winter and cool in the summer. I had studied the Indian cultures of the Southwest in my anthropology courses. The vanished cultures interested me the most. Scott pulled the van to a stop in front of the white adobe house. The lawn that separated it from the suburban house on the left looked weedy and overgrown. "Who wants to mow the lawn?" Scott asked in his best cheery voice.
"I do!"
yelled Nick. Dion chimed in. Sterling laughed. He knows a trick when he hears one. "Okay, Nick, you and Dion can help me just as soon as the moving van gets here." "Honey, let's get the furniture set up first, okay?" I said. I had never suspected Scott had a passion for yard work. In the rambling house on the edge of town we'd been living in until this house came open, he left the yard to me and concentrated on keeping the furniture in good repair and the plumbing healthy. I planted the tulip bulbs and coaxed Prudence and Carol into helping me weed. I had wanted to stay there, but Scott kept griping. "Via, you own that enormous house, for heaven's sake. How easy is it going to be to find renters? Why don't we just move in? We're one of the few families I know of who could actually use all of that space." I couldn't explain my reluctance. There was something about that house. Ever since my father's will had been read 3 years earlier and he left the house to me, I had felt something in some tucked away corner of my mind. After hearing the clause that left me title to the house, I looked at my 3 brothers, strangers to me, angry strangers, who stared back. Douglas, the oldest, had smiled a terrible smile at me. Carl's eyes had grown wide. Then he turned his face away from me. Mark said, "No, he can't mean that." He slumped down, a slender, insubstantial 30-year-old who had never grown up. "I don't need it," I said. "I'll deed it over to you." "No, Olivia," said Douglas. "That house belongs to you. Keep it." Carl shook his head, but he didn't say anything. Since the house came to me, I had let Scott take care of all the maintenance and yard work. I let him deal with the renters. I didn't even want to see the house, and I couldn't tell him why. He accepted it the same way he accepted my blank slate childhood, with a kiss and a, "That's all right, Via. I don't have to understand." "Come on, troops," Scott said now, hopping down out of the van and going around to sling open the sliding door.
"Mommy, I want out,"
said Sarah, reaching for the door handle. I let her out, then descended to the gravelly drive myself and stood staring at the blank white facade of the house. The children trooped up the brick walkway toward the front courtyard, a cobblestone patio between the wings of the lower story.
"Open it! Open it!"
Carol cried, tugging at the front door. Scott fished keys out of his pocket and opened the front door. The children pushed past him into the house. My throat closed. I felt dizzy. "Scott, don't let them out of your sight." "What?" He glanced after them. They went whooping through the house, scattering. "Via, calm down." I've been through this place with the termite people, and there isn't an unsound board in the whole house. It's great. Scott, I said, and gripped his arm. Scott! He put his arm around me. What is it, honey? I took 2 staggering steps, and I was over the threshold and into the house, Scott supporting me. Doesn't it smell bad in here? Lysol, maybe. I had professional cleaners in. The last tenants left a mess, but they had a big cleaning deposit too. Not that, I said. I eased out of his embrace and strode down the front hallway toward the western wing. The master bedroom's through here, Scott said, pointing down a little hall. I turned away from him and mounted the stairs. Nick, I called. I heard his voice arguing with Sterling's above us. Nick, where's Artie? Carol came to the top of the stairs. Mom, guess what? There's a closet up here big enough to be a bedroom. I ran up the stairs. Get out of there!
I don't like that closet. It's the one place in the house I don't like. I haven't for a long time. Even before it turned into Matt's closet. Before Matt was the one in the closet. I was in the closet. He locked me in all the time. He was only 1 year older than me, but he was lots bigger. When he was really feeling mean, he'd hide the key so the others couldn't let me out, except Doug would hear me screaming in the closet and go get Mama, and she had a key that worked too. She always said, I must get Daddy to take the lock off that door, but she never did. I spent a lot of time in that closet. It had all kinds of great games and puzzles and things in it because it was the upstairs playroom closet, and crayons and poster paints and sketch pads. But Matt locked me in and left the light off. The light switch was outside, so I couldn't do anything about it. Once I found crayons and marked all over the walls in the dark because I was just so mad and nobody was home to let me out. Mama gave me Windex and a razor blade and some scrubbing things and made me clean everything off. I cut myself. There were some marks back behind the costumes for dress-up I never did get off, but she didn't look very close. Matt and I were always fighting. He was mad because I got the big bedroom with its own bathroom. He said that wasn't fair when he had to share a room with Doug and Carl and Mark had to share a room too. Mama said it was because I was a girl. Matt said that wasn't fair either. Daddy said nobody ever promised anybody life would be fair. After Matt was in the closet, nobody would talk to me. It took Daddy and Mama a long time to find a new house. They tried to sell our house, but no one would buy it. So we stayed here. I do love this house. One night I ran down the stairs past Matt's closet and went to Daddy's study. At dinners and at breakfasts, everybody looked at me and looked away. Nobody talked. I took a sack lunch to school and ate outside because nobody there would talk to me either. I went to Daddy and said, Tell me you love me, Daddy. Please, please, just tell me you love me just once. And he cried and he said, Livy, I know you can't understand this, baby. We're doing the best we can. Scott held me and said, What's wrong? What's wrong? I said, Don't let the children go into that closet, not until you take the door off, Scott. Promise me. Sterling looked sideways at me. Maria came up and hugged my waist. I picked her up and hugged her, burying my face in her clean black hair. Oh, baby, I whispered. I love you. I love you. Scott said, You kids, you heard your mother. Nobody goes in that closet, all right? I mean it now. But, Daddy, said Carol, there's nothing in there. It's just empty, except there's some marks on the wall. I went to the threshold and stared in. Way on the back wall, some faint scribbles in purple crayon. A child's stick figure drawing of a person with a big frown on its face. And lower down in green, 3 words. Help, help, help. Somebody's been sleeping in my bed. It's not really my bed. I mean, I can sit on my bed. Most of the time I just walk through all of the furniture new people bring into the house, and I can walk through the new people too. But now there are 2 girls sleeping in my room on a bed that's in the same place my bed is. I can see and hear them better than I usually do. One of them is having a nightmare. Mommy!
I heard two voices. Scott stirred in the bed beside me. "Go back to sleep," I murmured. "It's probably just first night and a new place jitters." He mumbled something about first day jitters and how many jitters could the world possibly hold. I kissed him and got my robe and went upstairs. Carol and Maria got the big room at the east end of the upstairs. The voices were theirs. I ran up the stairs, looked at the playroom closet, which Scott had nailed shut for me after I checked it 3 times to be absolutely certain none of the children were inside, and went to the girls' room. "Mommy, Maria's having a nightmare," Carol said, sitting up in her white nightgown. Maria had a grip on Carol's hand, and her eyes were wide and frightened. "She wouldn't let me go get you." "Mammy, a spirit, a spirit!" "What? What is it, my baby?" I sat on the bed beside her and hugged her. "He's my sister," she whispered. "The little one." "Maria," I whispered, "you have a sister?" "Nick said she had a little sister, but she died," said Carol. "The agency didn't tell us. Oh, baby, I'm so sorry." And I thought, no, I was wrong. Their lives don't start when they join our family. Scott talks to them about their pasts. Whenever something like that comes up, I turn it over to Scott. He remembers being a child. He knows what it's like to have a past and how to live with one. "Would you like some warm milk with honey in it?" I asked Maria. "Mammy!" she cried and pointed past my shoulder. I looked and saw a little girl shimmering there in front of the closet door. Cold terror touched my heart. I hugged Maria tightly, more for my comfort than for hers. Carol climbed onto the bed behind me, putting her arms around my shoulders. "Daddy!" she screamed. "Shh," I said. "Shh." And then a song woke in me, a lullaby, not one of Grandma's, though. I sang. "Evening's come and day is done, gone are sing and shout. Time to rest in blanket nest and blow the candles out. Down the road to dreams you'll go, there to stay and play. Nothing here but sleeping self, come to end of day. Know I love you when you go, wherever you may roam. I'll be here to welcome you when you come back home." I heard my voice and thought it wasn't really my voice. It was my mother's voice. I couldn't even remember my mother speaking to me, let alone singing to me. The little shimmering girl crept closer to us. I felt Carol's fingers tighten like talons on my shoulders. "Mama," said the little girl. Her voice sounded like someone talking underwater. Maria let out a wail and buried her face against my breast. "Mama," said the little girl. She reached out and touched my face, and then she vanished. The 3 of us sat in the bed and wailed, clutching at each other, and I remembered. "I colored in my coloring book so carefully, staying inside the lines. Matt took a black crayon and marked across my 3 favorite pictures. I wanted to put them on my bulletin board, but he wrecked them. So I locked him in the closet. Matt was in sailing camp with Robin's brother Tommy, and he didn't want to leave the neighborhood. He was supposed to stay with Robin and Tommy while the rest of us went to visit Grandma in San Francisco. She was sick. I locked Matt in the closet right before we left. I forgot. Matt was supposed to feed our cats while we were gone, even my cat, Little Explorer. They were outside cats, and when they didn't get fed, they all ran away. When we came back from 2 weeks at Grandma's, there was a smell in the house. Tommy's and Robin's mother saw our big station wagon pull in, and she came running across the lawn. "Isn't Matt with you?" she said. "I tried to call you and ask, but I couldn't remember your mother's name." And she looked in the car, and Doug and Carl and Mark and I looked back. I thought maybe Matt ran away. He used to talk about running away. So did I. Sometimes at night we snuck out on the roof together and talked about running away. Matt wanted to go to Mexico. He wanted to find an iguana and tame it for a pet.
For a minute, I thought maybe Matt went to Mexico. But then I remembered.
Carol's face was hot and wet, pressed into the back of my neck. I could feel Maria's hot tears soaking through my robe and nightgown. I felt a chill in me that even the heat of tears could not banish, as the 9-year-old child inside me began to speak.